once you cross that point and realize how far you've come, you're so high up, there's no turning back.
I'm in gold mode, it's do or die. I know you see the fire in my eyes. I told you not to be afraid of heights. We're jumping off the edge, fall or fly. I'm fighting failures in my past fears. I really hope you built to last here. The air is thinner in this atmosphere. I might make some people mad this year. I might get in your mental, I might get in your temple. I might flip a table, I know God is able. I know I'm a favor, I am not your God. You are not my savior, this is war. This is
We welcome you to St. James AME. My wife, Reverend B. Smith, and I'm Pastor Al Smith, pastor of the church.
Well, we want to welcome you to St. James. St. James was founded in 1867, and so this is not the original site. The original site is on San Pedro Creek, and right now that is undergoing renovation. And so we are very glad to have you here with us today.
With the original foundation of the church, they just stumbled as they were extending the creek on the original foundation of the church. And so right now we're going through quite a bit of historical fact-finding to find out about the church, to find out about the contributions the church has made here in the community.
The original church had 1,500 members, and that was in the 1800s. And so it was a church that had people who were professionals, teachers, doctors, lawyers, engineers. The first fire department came out of St. James. The first black police department was founded in St. James. The NAACP, and in fact, in this church, we have a window from the Masons, because the Masons in Texas were founded in St. James. So it's a very historical church.
When we talk about the fire department, please understand that the fire department was separate. You had the white fire department, and then the first African American fire department was established here by the members and the pastor of the church. But when they had fires, the department could not go or would not go into African American areas to put out or contain a fire. These windows are so historical, and yet because of being historical, they're old, and we're trying our best to preserve them. And but because they're old, they're falling out, and so we're trying our best to hold on to them. We had some of the Masons here, and they were so taken back, but they didn't know the history in terms of the church and the Masons. And they just said that's so unusual, because we would be probably the only church to have that particular symbol. Then when I read that pastor at that time helped form the Masons for the state of Texas. And so they started right here, in St. James. Reverend Mitchell would probably be able to, he wanted to know about how old this building is itself.
Let's see if you, you guys took a look at the marker down there, right?
Because it says 1870?
Yeah, that's when I believe this building was erected. And what they did was they worshiped downstairs. This portion right here wasn't put on until later. We have pictures of, they would all go down to the basement, and then when they started working on this one, there was another picture that they made of the whole congregation. And so, but this portion came later. This, I think, was the fourth location of the church.
Right.
The first one was downtown, down at the old soap factory, where the apartments are now. Then they moved over to an area, where the Alameda is.
Oh.
They moved in there and worshiped there for a little while, and then they came back over here near the creek, and they had a place they called the cathedral. It was a beautiful place.
You can imagine there was so much divisiveness in terms of culture because of race, because you're talking about pretty much right after the Civil War. Two pastors that were assigned here never made it here. They were actually killed. You know, the members, as he stated, were far different, and they fought for their rights and their opportunities. Really blazed a trail for what we see today with San Antonio, and sound like and it looks like they worked well with the Hispanic community as well. But that's a piece of history that's now in the museum that has just been started here in San Antonio. So they may have a lot of those documents. Not right now. We're working with the college, the museum, to try to take some of our archives and make sure that the university preserves so it could be here for future generations.
How important do you think it is for the church to donate pieces of history to the museum and to the universities?
I think that it's so important for our future generations to preserve, because if we don't preserve our history and have it there with the university, it dies. And no one really knows the story. And I think that that's something that's haunting us across the country, is that there's so many stories, but as generations die, those stories die with them. And, you know, no one's aware of the legacy. So to answer your question, I think it's very important to preserve it with the university and make sure that, you know, our generations following have something to look at and read and be proud of, continually be told. You were asking about the military. The stories that I heard while serving in Japan, unlike anything I've ever heard, and these were stories by locals, by ex-military that married into cultures, and they let me know that an African American presence, not necessarily African American, but an African presence, was very visible, especially in the Philippines, because of the contributions of the Portuguese that brought persons to the Philippines and other parts of Asia to hide them so they could escape slavery.
That's powerful.
I didn't hear that or learn that in the history books here in the United States.
Yeah.
It's very difficult when you finally see the world and then to return home and various pages have been stripped from the history books. And I understand the same thing existed in the Philippines, where we were able to come in and maintain a sense of identity and a sense of culture, and they blended, which was really unique. If I can share a story just briefly, imagine going all the way back to 1787, and in St. George's Methodist Episcopal Church, the African Americans that belonged to the church sat in the balcony. How this church started, they were praying at the altar, and they were asked to leave the altar. Matter of fact, they were pulled from the altar. Two gentlemen. One was Richard Allen, who was the founder of our church, and the other one was the first black Episcopalian priest to be allowed in the Episcopalian church. When Richard Allen started the AME church, it was in a blacksmith shop, and his first pulpit was an anvil. And from that, we've been able to launch the oldest African American university, Wilberforce University, located in Ohio. The first black newspaper, the Christian Recorder. The NAACP itself started in the basement of an AME church. And so historically, they always felt that the spiritual and the social justice of society, they were able to weave this partnership. And that's pretty much why the AME Church has always been an advocate for spiritual, social justice for everyone. When you talk about various movements, you can't help but hear the AME Church's name because anytime there was a sense of injustice, we were always somewhat present. Historically, other churches came about, but even with Dr. King, even though he was Baptist, a lot of the AME churches were places where they gathered, and the civil rights movement was very strong and visible with our bishops and with our pastors and with our churches. That's why I applaud this interview, because I believe that, as I said outside, we are so much stronger when we're united than when we are divided. And it's most unfortunate that a lot of people don't know the history of our cultures. I'm going to say it. Shame on those Americans that are taking advantage of Asian families because they don't really know the history. And so for those younger generations, that's why it's so important that we preserve our history so they can learn that we're in this together. All of us have struggled to make America what she is today. And for us to be pulled out of its history, you're denying the truth.